Yo, you know what time it is. You know what time it is. It's your boy Trevor David Climate back up at it. And as you can see here, I've got this Astrum Earth video pulled up. The title here now is I didn't want to make this video, but before I guess he changed the title, it was Climate Change We've Lost. That was the actual title. Before I continue, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. So let's do this. The whole point of my channel is combating climate change, reversing it, because it's a very serious issue. So obviously, I'm not trying to hear about something like we've lost, but I'm sure there's like a reason why he's saying this. I don't personally think we've lost, but this is a real knowledgeable dude. I've watched his videos on space. That's the channel he's most famous for. So I'm excited and a little scared actually to see what he's talking about. This is a half-hour long video, so let's jump right in.
This is the most important video you are ever going to watch.
It's
why I'm here on screen talking to you today. Because humanity has lost the fight against climate change.
Oh no.
These were the words of renowned environmentalist David Suzuki, and they sent shockwaves around the world in July 2025 when he spoke them. And I'm afraid it gets worse.
Oh no. Oh, not the glaciers.
Carl Sagan, an American scientist, said extinction is the rule.
Carl Sagan.
Survival is the exception. So yes, he said, we will go extinct. The only question is when,
Carl Sagan.
Not if.
He doesn't know that.
I find it hard to believe that humans will still populate the planet by 2100. And if you think that's bad, wait till you hear this one. Michael Dowd said, I think half or more of the human population, that's 3 to 5 billion people, will likely starve within 16 months of the first multi-bread basket failure. Most likely this decade. Truthfully, I would rather tell you differently. I'd love to talk about some sort of climate silver bullet that can bring us back from the edge of the cliff, but I don't think that exists. And I didn't really want to make this video, if I'm honest with you.
Come on, man.
But I felt like I had to say something in response to all those words. You know, I have a channel called Astrum Earth. Yeah. It would be remiss not to talk about what's actually happening here on Earth. And this one's a little bit different, as I'm sure you may have noticed. This feels like way too an important conversation not to have eye to eye. So that's what we're going to do in this video. You and I having a conversation. I want this to be your all-encompassing guide to climate change. And we're going to look at where we're really at. And fair warning, this ain't going to be pretty. You're going to get angry. I mean, geez, I'm angry. I'm outraged. Whatever the right word is, I feel it too. And I'm right here with you on this strange journey we're about to embark upon.
Yeah.
I feel like I should say now, please don't hate me during this. Be angry at why it's been allowed to happen. Feel free, shout in the comments, rage at policymakers, be pissed off. Please, we all are. This video is based not on my opinions or anyone here at Astrum Earth, but in true Astrum Earth style, this is based on science. All right, let's get into it. I'm James Stewart and you're watching Astrum Earth. In this video, I'm going to show you every single chance humanity had to stop climate collapse and how we blew every single one. We'll explore the latest climate data to see whether David Suzuki's claims are backed up, and we'll confront the ultimate question. Have we truly lost the fight against climate change?
No, it's not. We can still do this.
So first things first, you may be wondering how we got here. So let's start by looking at all the times the world has come together to successfully unite on fighting climate change and save humanity.
Here we go.
Yeah, it makes for short reading that, doesn't it? Actually, it makes for no reading at all. So instead, let's look at all the times we could have saved the world. Yeah, I've set up a handy counter in the corner of the screen so you can keep track. Back in the 1970s and 1980s, there weren't any conferences or meetings of world leaders to talk about climate change at all. Then, as science caught up, the UN sort of decided it would be a good idea to have some policies or agreements that sought to regulate our changing world. Enter the IPCC, or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It was set up in 1988 to provide scientific assessment on climate change for policy. Like the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is a bit of a mouthful, or UNFCCC, which is the treaty that provides the framework for international climate action. They also started hosting COPs, or Conference of the Parties, which are the annual meetings you may have seen hit the news every year, in which countries that are parties to the treaty gather to make decisions. or at least they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And by the end of this video, you'll see why every one of those meetings failed, and why actually the most dangerous decade to be alive is the one we're living in right now.
I can agree with
It
that.
wouldn't be until 1992
Sadly.
that one of those UN acronyms came to fruition. And at the UNFCCC, parties agreed to stabilise greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. Chance number one to save the world went about as well as you might expect. In the subsequent years, the planet did actually cool down, but not due to government action, but because of a huge volcanic eruption. With little human progress made, just 5 years later, another meeting was held. The Kyoto Protocol, which, although adopted in 1997, due to a complex ratification process, didn't enter into force until 2005.
Dang.
Who needs urgency anyway?
I remember that actually.
Its main purpose was to commit 37 industrialized nations to cut their greenhouse gas emissions by an average of 5% below 1990 levels by 2008 to 2012, with, by the way, no mention of temperature limitations. You can probably see where this is going.
Here we go.
Fear not, because there was another agreement in 2010, of course there was, the Cancun Agreement. Maybe this could be the one. Now, this really was the first time temperature levels were mentioned, and an agreement was formalised to limit the increase in global average temperature to below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. However, during this time, research continued to show, unsurprisingly, that for some countries and vulnerable ecosystems, the risk of grave damage rapidly increases at less than 2 degrees Celsius of warming. So yeah, another miss. Now, here's the good stuff, because in 2015, nearly the entire world, 195 odd nations, came together at the United Nations held International Climate Meeting, or COP21, to sign the Paris Agreement. And that date in December 2015 should have been remembered as the day the human race came together and saved the world. Now, up to this point, you could argue the world didn't really understand the scale of the problem. But after this next meeting in Paris, that excuse disappears completely. The Paris Agreement aims to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, and pursue efforts to keep warming within the safer limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius. And I don't think I need to tell you what happened here, do I? Once again, owing to self-interest, economic inequalities, and some would say downright greed. Spoiler alert, current end of century predictions place us at 3.5 to 4 degrees of warming.
Yeah, that's like planetary
This
destruction.
hot on the heels of the most recent COP30 in Brazil took place recently, and once again, they failed to cut fossil fuels. Great work, everyone. Great trip. Love that. Now, in any conversation about climate change, you'll notice the figure 1.5 degrees Celsius is rarely far from the discussion. But what does this actually mean? Because it doesn't sound like a huge number, does it? So what's all the fuss about? 1.5 degrees Celsius above what? Well, the answer is a wholly unsatisfactory average. We usually define it as the average global temperature over the pre-industrial period, or the time before the increase in atmospheric greenhouse gases due to human emissions began to significantly influence global temperatures. For instance, the September 2023 global surface temperature was 1.44 degrees above average, specifically the average September of the 20th century. But it's not always that simple, because we don't make it easy for ourselves. The definition of which years make up this pre-industrial period varies. Most historians would define the dates of the Industrial Revolution between the mid-1700s and the mid-1800s, but scientific definitions of pre-industrial typically cover some ranges of decades between 1850 and 1900. Now, that's not because scientists are terrible at history, but because that's the earliest time period with widespread, consistent surface temperature records to go off. Without getting too bogged down in the technicalities, the crucial takeaway really here is that industrial versus pre-industrial is actually about the human impact on our climate, and how scientists can distinguish that from natural variability going back thousands of years. Which brings us back to the big question. Who decided 1.5 was going to be the magic number? The Paris Agreement was the only time everyone agreed to an actual number for the global warming limit. That's it. We sort of have no other benchmark but that 1.5 degrees. As a direct result of the Paris Agreement, the IPCC put together a special report in 2018, in which they warned global warming is likely to reach 1.5 degrees between 2030 and 2052, if it continues to increase at the current rate. Okay, good news, it's still 2018 at this point, remember, there's still time to act. So, did we listen to that warning? What do you reckon? Well, in its 6th assessment report, the AR6, released in parts from 2021 through to 2023, the IPCC said if we wanted to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, then global CO2 emissions would need to peak by 2025 at the latest, and then fall by 43% in time for 2030. That's relative to 2019 levels. And methane emissions will then need to drop by about a third in the same time frame. Now, here's a good bit, because I'm here. This is the future. It's early 2026 as I record this. They've had so many chances to sort this out. Oh, they wouldn't let us down, would they? Surely not. Up until this point, everything so far has been nothing short of a brief history lesson, really. But what comes next is the part that decides whether this century is survivable. Let's start with emissions, where the news is, not good. In fact, it's terrible. Because atmospheric emissions of CO2 hit a record high in June 2025 at 427 parts per million. For context, the last time CO2 was that high was likely over 3 million years ago, when global temperatures were about 2.5 to 4 degrees warmer than pre-industrial levels. And sea levels were 25 meters higher than today.
Dang.
What? So yeah, what I'm telling you is that despite knowing this would happen for 40 odd years, not only did emissions continue to rise, they're now so high, they're at the same level as before the earliest known members of our genus even existed. Should quickly say the reason it's not actually 2.5 to 4 degrees Celsius hotter today is down to a time lag between cause and effect in our climate. In other words, we'll experience the full effects of today's emissions in the years to come. So sorry in advance, future grandchildren. And if you thought that was bad, it gets worse, because the growth isn't slowing. In just 1 year, from October 2024 to October 2025, CO2 jumped by about 2.2 parts per million, from 422.35 to 424.54. And there is no sign, according to NOAA, that we've even hit the peak yet. At the beginning of 2020, scientists estimated that humanity could only emit 500 billion more tons of carbon dioxide, only, if we were to have a 50% chance of keeping warming to 1.5 degrees. But by the start of 2025, a new study said this so-called carbon budget had shrunk to just 130 billion tons. Oof, ouch. Yeah, if you're still keeping score, emissions-wise, there's not really anything else to say other than based on those IPCC reports and those numbers, yeah, as our friend David Suzuki said, we have lost the fight against climate change, and we've lost bad. The next factor we have to look at is global temperature, the sort of bottom line outcome of all those emissions. And I don't even want to tell you about this one, if I'm honest. So NOAA, NASA, other agencies track Earth's surface temperature via thousands of weather stations, ocean buoys, and satellites. And when they're not being torn apart by the US government, they release their findings, and who'd have thunk it? It's more bad news. I did tell you at the start of this video this was going to be a tough watch, didn't I? Well done if you've got this far. The data here shows an unequivocal warming trend. In fact, the past decade, from 2015 to 2024, has been the hottest since records began in the 19th century. For small islands and low-lying nations, the reality is hitting hard. They are already seeing storms like 2025's Hurricane Melissa, the largest hurricane ever to hit Jamaica. There, water temperatures were 1.4 degrees warmer than average, dramatically and rapidly increasing the intensity of the storm by nearly double. These conditions were made up to 700 times more likely due to human-caused climate change, according to analysis from science nonprofit Climate Central. A once in 10-year heat wave in pre-industrial times is twice as frequent at 1.5 degrees warming and would cause about 14% of Earth's population to face severe and regular heat waves. A new report from The Lancet suggests heat-related deaths would surge, increasing by 23% from the numbers seen in the 1990s, and they were absolutely right. Very sadly, heat-related deaths now register at well over 500,000 per year. Even in 2024, pollution from wildfire smoke alone was attributed to 154,000 deaths. In short, even at 1.5 degrees, billions of people would be impacted. The best case scenario is arguably still horrendous. And if that doesn't piss you off enough, this might. Even if you think about the most recent years, 2023 was the warmest year on record at the time, 1.18 degrees above the 20th century average, and roughly 1.3 degrees above the pre-industrial level. And no one said a thing. And even more ridiculous still is it barely held that title for 12 months.
Oh my.
2024 came along and shattered that record at 1.55 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Oh, honestly, I need a break. I'm sure you must do as well, because this is exhausting. So if you're looking for a tiny piece of positivity in amongst all of that, I might have one. Because NOAA points out that although global surface temperatures in September, October and November 2023 exceeded 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial period, there were other influences outside of human-induced changes. Factors like El Nino and random weather events can briefly push up monthly or even yearly global temperatures above 1.5 degrees. But to bring us back to reality, human-caused warming was by far the main reason for those high temperatures. And 2025, now we have the data, was the third hottest on record, beaten only by, yeah, you guessed it, 2023 and 2024. Now, these aren't sort of secret stats I've conjured up and hidden in a vault down here. These are readily available to you, to everyone, and of course that includes governments. And well, should I say this? We might cut this bit out. Anyway, in the 12 months leading up to 2025, governments awarded 492 new oil and gas exploration licenses globally. And right on cue, Donald Trump, to start 2026, very generously helped Venezuela, the country with the largest known crude oil reserve, influence how that oil is sold. So 2026 is picked off where 2025 left off. It's off to a flyer. But it's not all about data and scary numbers, because all of this alarming information affects something we can't see too. As the independent climate change research organisation Berkeley Earth put it, the Paris target of staying below 1.5 degrees Celsius at this point is unobtainable. Even UN Chief Antonio Guterres, speaking ahead of COP30 in Brazil, acknowledged it's now inevitable that humanity will overshoot the target. Let's recognise our failure, he told the Guardian newspaper. Looking at those temperatures on their own without context can be a little meaningless, but these temperature records aren't just numbers, they translate into tangible extremes. NOAA's data also calculates an uptick in extreme events that aligns with climate change predictions. For example, in the United States in 2023, they suffered a record number of billion-dollar weather disasters, things like wildfires, hurricanes, severe storms, which NOAA tallied at 28 separate major events. Globally, we've seen unprecedented wildfire seasons, as in Canada and Australia. Deadly heat waves, I think back to 2022 in South Asia, or 2023 even in the Mediterranean. Intense floodings like we've seen in Pakistan. These kinds of extremes regularly make the headlines now. They've become normal. Climate change has moved from a future threat to a present-day emergency. Indeed, if we judge by atmospheric metrics alone, humanity hasn't even slightly begun to win. In fact, you could argue we're still digging the hole deeper. Yeah. For David Suzuki, the man whose words prompted this video, data around temperatures and greenhouse gas emissions are just the start, because there's something else going wrong too. Very wrong. I know that was a lot, so thanks for sticking with me. And if you are in desperate need for some good news, you're not alone, I promise you. Not because we want a comforting story, but because we need evidence that doing something still matters, because it does. Enter Planet Wild. They are a community-based nature protection organisation helping our planet. I think of them like crowdfunding, but for nature. Each month, their community funds a mission to restore nature around the world, and then they document it with a YouTube video, so you can see the impact of your contribution. It's actually that transparency that encouraged me to become a member in the first place. They've done such a good job at helping our planet. All you need to do is check out their page to see what they're all about. From turning farmland into an ancient swamp to a wild plan at restoring a forest without planting a single tree. That's particularly impressive. Honestly, I adore what these guys do, which is why the first 100 people to sign up using my code Astrum2 will get their first month paid for by me. Yeah, I mean it. Just scan this QR code or click the link in the video description. You'll immediately have an impact and see the results in less than 30 days. If you want to see them in action, check out their mission to restore a forest with the link in the description below, as we head back to the video. Well, apparently I'm a glutton for punishment because here we go again. Strap in, folks. It gets better. And by better, I mean worse. In the mid-2000s, a group of Earth system scientists led by Johann Rockström identified 9 planetary boundaries, essentially Earth's critical life support systems, each with a threshold we shouldn't cross if we want to maintain a stable planet. This is something Suzuki directly referenced in that interview, and the boundaries include climate change, biodiversity, land system change, that's when the transformation of landscapes from things like deforestation and urbanization, freshwater use, biogeochemical flows, which includes the nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, ocean acidification, stratospheric ozone depletion, atmospheric aerosol loading, and novel entities, so things like chemical pollution. Staying within these boundaries keeps us in what science calls a safe operating space for humanity, which obviously would be very nice. Crossing them risks triggering large-scale, potentially abrupt or irreversible environmental changes. Think of them like pressure limits on a life support machine. Push beyond the red line and the system can fail in unpredictable ways. So how are we doing with these? Honestly, at this point, I'm almost scared to tell you. From research published in 2023, 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries have already been crossed. Those are climate change, biosphere integrity, land system change, freshwater use, biogeochemical flows, and novel entities. Yes, 6, 2/3 done, gone, finito, goodbye. And just when it seemed things couldn't get any worse, they did. Quite literally, as I was recording this live, we crossed a 7th. Ocean acidification, gone. Since the start of the industrial era, the ocean's surface pH has fallen by around 0.1 units. That's a 30 to 40% increase in acidity, pushing marine ecosystems beyond safe limits and degrading the ocean's ability to act as Earth's stabilizer. What this means in real terms is that warm water coral reefs, vital to nearly 1 billion people and a quarter of marine species, have already passed their threshold of stability. Mass coral die-off is underway, and unless global warming is reversed, large reef systems as we know them will disappear.
Oh no.
Only 2 of Earth's boundaries remain in the safe green area: the stratospheric ozone layer and atmospheric aerosol loading. Some of you of a certain age, like me, may remember hearing about the ozone layer at school, but these days we never really hear much more about it, and this is kind of a good news story. It's all down to a global phase-out of CFCs, which worked spectacularly well. So well, in fact, the ozone is slowly recovering, a rare success story in amongst all this chaos. Everything else, climate, biodiversity, deforestation, freshwater use, pollution, ocean chemistry, and nutrient overload, well, that's lit up in warning colours. In Suzuki's words, if we pass one boundary, we should be shitting our pants. We've passed 7. You know what really gets me after all that we've just digested from this video? There was a 2019 report from the Climate Accountability Institute, and they found that just 20 state-owned and private companies are responsible for 1/3 of all global emissions since 1965.
Damn.
All of them are big fossil fuel companies. In many cases, still to this day, turning record profits. Collectively, national governments spent $956 billion on fossil fuel subsidies in 2023. Yeah, subsidies. Why do these oil companies need subsidies with their profit margins? Like, have they suddenly rebranded as charities that we weren't aware of? Yet, despite all of that, somehow we're made to feel like it's our fault. Make that make sense. Okay, granted, passing multiple boundaries doesn't guarantee immediate catastrophe, but it heightens the likelihood of severe disruptions to the planet's equilibrium. We might not notice the cliff until we're falling off it, in other words. So, another battle lost, and another win in the column of David Suzuki's statement for a game he does not want to be the victor in. So is that it? Did we lose? Despite all of what we've just talked about, the IPCC still doesn't frame this as game over, and I don't know, frankly, if they're just naive or if they're too scared to say it. Instead, they say limiting to 1.5 degrees with a small overshoot or to well below 2 degrees is still worth fighting for. After Paris set 1.5 degrees as a goal, researchers scrambled to figure out how and if it could be done. The emerging consensus was that meeting 1.5 degrees likely requires a temporary overshoot. In other words, we have to go over the 1.5 degrees before we bring it back down again, which is surely an admission of defeat from that agreement, but there we go. The basic concept is that we'd have to use negative emissions, things like carbon removal, to draw CO2 down and cool the planet back below 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. This was a concept floated by renowned climate scientist Professor Piers Forster at the University of Leeds. Forster's article points to modelling scenarios where this happens. He even provided a chart showing how a 5-year ratchet mechanism of increasingly ambitious pledges could flatten or even slightly reduce emissions in the 2020s, and then drive them down in the second half of the century. During the process, global temperature might overshoot 1.5 degrees by a few tenths of a degree for several decades, maybe hitting 1.7 or 1.8 degrees mid-century, but then slowly decline to 1.5 degrees by 2100. Now, for this to work, every single tool must be used in parallel. Renewables, efficiency, electrification of transport, reforestation, carbon capture, behavior change, methane reduction, you name it, we have to do it. And that also includes things that were once unthinkable at scale. Things like direct air capture of CO2 or burying carbon with biochar. Because to pull the planet back from an overshoot, we likely have to go to net negative, where we remove more carbon than we emit later this century.
Yeah.
And perhaps we stand a chance. The IPCC has documented rapid advances in clean energy. Since 2010, the cost of solar power, wind power, and lithium batteries, for example, has plummeted by as much as 85%, making a renewable energy transition more attainable than ever. Many nations have strengthened policies, and by 2022, over 170 countries included adaptation and mitigation in their plans. The IPCC chair Ho Sung Lee stated, "We have the tools and know-how required to limit warming."
That's facts.
But the big question still remains, doesn't it? Just because we've got the tools, will we use them? Because what I find particularly worrying about all of this is where this blame for not meeting these targets is being placed. Because it's not on the biggest offenders, is it? It's not on big companies and industry. It's on us. It's on individuals. The focus of many policies calls on regular people like me and you to drive less, recycle more, minimize water use, eat less meat, etc., etc. Even the term carbon footprint was marketed by BP, who are a petrol company, to shift the rhetoric and put the onus on individuals to save energy instead of fossil fuel companies. Given that only 27% of electricity is used domestically, this is a huge win for fossil fuel company lobbyists. while I'm worrying about turning my heater down by 1 degree, BP in Q3 of 2025 reported a $2.2 billion profit. But there is still a reason to lower your carbon footprint, not because turning your lights off or cycling to work make a big difference in itself, but because the real impact comes from the collective action of others doing the same. Just by watching this video, for example.
Yeah.
It's not about the carbon you save, but the cultural and political change you build. Now, this is hugely important. When millions of people start changing their habits, it does two things. First of all, it builds personal awareness and a climate-conscious culture. But secondly, it creates social and political pressure. It signals to politicians and corporations that voters and consumers demand drastic change elsewhere. If we keep that pressure on, then hopefully it's only a matter of time before we see a shift in global policies, and those most responsible for climate change are forced to stop. So, have we lost the battle against climate change? If winning meant no damage, no overshoot, and staying under 1.5 degrees Celsius, then yeah, David Suzuki was right. The battle is well and truly lost. Even the greatest scientific minds seem to suggest the only way back is going over the target set. Suzuki's despairing view that it's too late also resonates when we count the missed opportunities over the last 30 years, and we still, to this day, see emissions rising. We will endure a period of climate suffering that might have been averted with earlier action, and that is just a fact. And the stark reality is there's a 50% chance, according to researchers at Stanford, that global warming will breach 2 degrees Celsius even if humanity meets our current goals of rapidly reducing greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by the 2050s. With our current rate of warming at around 0.27 degrees per decade, which is faster than anything in the geological record, by the way, 3.6 billion people will be left highly vulnerable. Yes, a lot of change is already baked into the climate and ecological systems. And yes, a lot of bad things are going to happen. But remember this also, the Earth is incredibly resilient. And guess what? So are we, so are humans. You know, I find myself watching the film Don't Look Up every now and then. And if you've seen that or you've heard of it, take a moment as we come to the end of this video to think about who you are in that film. And more importantly, who do you want to be? Thank you for watching this video. If you've got to this far in the video, please let me know your thoughts. You're probably gonna need some time to digest everything we've just talked about, and that's absolutely fair enough. That's what the comments are there for. We read them all, even the ones that think I'm AI. I'm here, I'm in real life. And on that point, obviously this video was a bit different. I wanted to have this conversation with you like this. If you like this kind of format, let us know. If you prefer just a voice, also fine. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Okay. 30-minute video, great video. Shout out, Alex. I'm glad you made that. Shout out for the face reveal. Like he said, this topic is so serious and so dire, it required him to come on camera. I've never seen his face before. Glad to see my man. This video definitely deserved it. Okay. So climate change, have we lost? That was the climate change we've lost. That was the original title of this video. And I mean, the picture that's painted is that as far as going over 1.5 degrees Celsius, which was this barrier that we weren't supposed to cross, you know, we did that. And he also goes into the multiple meetings and conferences that failed to do anything along the way since like the 70s. But as he rounds out at the end, we haven't really lost, quote unquote, because we're still alive. We're still here, and the earth is still in one piece. Shout out Luffy. Yeah, this video goes into directly why I made my channel, Trevor David Climate. This is why I made my channel, because we have to get the awareness out there. You know, we got to act. And among the biggest issues, and maybe the biggest issue, and this was actually going to be the topic of my next video, funnily enough, is the governments who are actively drilling and, you know, prospecting for new oil and sustaining, and like he said, increasing the oil industry. This is actually insane. It's legitimately insane. I found out while doing my Norway video, Norway, the double-edged climate leader, that Norway, who is supposedly the climate leader on the planet, and not supposedly, I mean, legitimately, because they don't sell any new gas cars in their nation. They're 99% supplied their electricity by hydro and gas power. Excuse me, hydro and wind power. So they are legitimately a form of climate change leader. But while doing research for that video, unintentionally, I found out that Norway is one of the top 10, or like number 11, but functionally top 10 producers of oil and gas on the planet. Top 10, and also one of the top 10 exporters, meaning they sell it at a high level, making money off of it while they're helping the climate. I was nothing short of horrified when I found that out, because I didn't expect that at all. That wasn't the point of me making that video. I was like, oh, let me just see about their hydropower and whatever, and I found out about that. And it's not just Norway. These countries are out here actively, drilling for and producing oil. Norway today, at the time of me recording this, February 17th, 2026, extracts about 2 million, 60 barrels of oil from the ground per day in the present. So they're actively causing climate change even in the present. And, this is something I found out unintentionally. So, and it's not just Norway. There are a lot of countries that do that. So the oil industry is like alive and well and increasing, as he said. So to me, that's like the main issue. Because like he said, while they tell you to turn down a degree on your thermostat, they're out here, extracting 2 million barrels of oil a day in the present. So what do we actually need to do? At this point, again, like I say, buy electric. Average person can buy an electric vehicle. What we actually have to do is get people in power who are going to do the right thing. And by power, I mean government and industry. That's really what it has to be. My generation, so millennials and the ones younger than me, our time is coming. So we will be in actual positions of leadership to get things done. And no one with my mindset or my generation, if they're in a position to where they can do something, they're going to make anti-climate change or anti-fossil fuel, anti-emissions policy. They're going to do it. It's in our mindset. Like, we can see it. We know. And I believe anyone in my generation with my mindset of our age group in a position of power will stop the drilling of oil, because that's what has to happen. We got to stop using that stuff. There's that line in Avengers where Nick Fury's like, Cap, do you have any advice about the Tesseract? You should have left it in the ocean where you found it. We should just leave oil underground. Don't mess with it anymore. Just leave it there. Oil and natural gas, it was collapsed millions of years ago, or it comes from dinosaurs and plants from way millions of years ago. It made this substance that's deep underground. Just leave it there. Just leave it underground where it belongs. We don't need it anymore, because it's actively, I was going to say, destroying our planet. According to Alex and some of these scientists, it's dang near destroyed, present tense, our planet. I know he also gave hope as well, and I'm a very hopeful person. So, but I'm saying the effects are kind of already here. I obviously think we can fight back. He does too. But we've done a lot. We've done a lot to our planet, to our Earth, just today. So anyone in my age group, if they're in a position of actual authority, they're just not going to drill for oil. It's the system that's set up is they do it, and they're still doing it. We could bring up certain administrations and certain, even individuals, but I'm not going to get into all that. But yeah, they're sustaining and increasing this industry despite the active collapse. It's an addiction in that regard, but again, I'm not really going to get too far into that. So I'm really glad he made this video. I am. Yeah. I mean, my message still holds true. Buy electric. That's the number one thing the average person can do. But now we're in a position where my generation, Shout out like Kirk Franklin. We need a revolution, and it's coming. I would say it's happening, but we need nothing short of a revolution to combat this. And like he said, not only do we need to stop drilling for oil, leave that stuff underground where you found it. Just don't mess with it anymore. Natural gas too, coal as well. We have to use every single tactic, every single method that we can stitch together in order to combat this. Carbon capture, replanting trees, methane tamer for the cows, so on and so forth. We have to use every tool that we have our hands on in order to actually combat this. But it really starts with we have to eliminate the root of the problem, which is burning fossil fuels. So just stop drilling for oil. Just stop using it. Just stop. Natural gas, coal, leave it underground. And I think that's really going to happen naturally because, like I just said, anyone in my age group or generation, once we ascend or get to those positions of actual authority, we're just not going to do that because it's ridiculous. All the scientists know, all the engineers know, anyone working neurons knows like the connection. Fossil fuels, you burn them, you destroy the planet. It's so simple. It's so simple. And that's what's frustrating about this problem is that it's not like interstellar flight or like curing extremely complex diseases. It's nothing on that level of high tier complexity that dang near requires like a computer, a quantum computer to figure out. This is not that complex. It's simple. And that's why it's frustrating. You burn fossil fuels. You put these chemicals into the atmosphere. You destroy the planet. It is so simple. It's basic. But there are all these factors involved that kind of get in the way of just resolving the issue. But the issue is very simple. We all know what not to do. But the people who have, who are up there, power, quote unquote, are doing actively like doing the wrong thing every single day, every day. But it has to stop. And I think we'll stop it because, it's just in our mindset. We know. So yeah. Shout out Alex. I'm glad he made this video. Like he said, it's not over yet, but we got to get a little bit more. I'd say we got to get a little bit more serious. Anyone in my generation who knows what to do, and this is millions of people. It's not even like a few people who know, like he said. Shout out Al Gore, one of the OGs, definitely knows. The list goes on and on. People know what to do, and a lot of people know. But we got to get up there and get active. You know what I mean? On the ground level with the people, driving electric and, everyone like knowing, like he said, mass awareness. Because it changes the entire culture. It changes the mindset of, the people in general that exist. Like that's the most powerful thing. Changing the mindset of like the mass amount of people. Because that's how you make like real change. So it starts with, we got the ground level, we got the people, but also like getting into the offices, government and industry, and actually making like the actual change. Like, no, we're not going to prospect that oil. Why would I do that? Like, I need to live on a planet. Where am I going to live? Like, stop playing. You're putting that stuff up there. So it's change at all levels. A revolution, like I just said. And I believe it will happen because there's no other outcome. It has to happen. As I'm sitting here making this video, I know if I were running a company, maybe I should, obviously, run a company or in a high level position in government, I know what to do. I'm like, no, I'm not signing that contract. Like, why would I do that? Like, give me a break. So, and this goes for other people, who know. Alex himself, you know what I mean? So yeah. I'm super glad he made this video, honestly. It was one of the first things I saw on my YouTube feed when I woke up in the morning. So obviously a bit mentally heavy for first thing in the morning, but I'm glad he made it, and I'm glad I'm doing this as well. So yeah, in conclusion, we got to get active. It's not over, and it won't be over because we're going to change it. Like, I mean, again, once my generation gets up there, and the one after me too, yeah, they're going to change it, but also we have to intentionally get active. So that's my conclusion. Hey, and that's all I got. Shout out Alex. Shout out for the face reveal. This topic definitely deserved it, like he said. Whoo, man, yeah. My catchphrase, we're on the right track. Yeah, we are, because like I said, my generation knows. So technically we are on the right track, but we got to get active. I will never, not in this lifetime, I will never fall into despair or hopelessness or nihilism, none of that. Be like, oh, it's over, and blah. Nah, because I mean, you can't, where do you go from there? You have to keep hope. You have to stay hopeful. and stay positive. So yeah, that's all I got. That's all I got. Again, glad he made this video. Y'all know I'm on the ball, driving electric and making these videos and just getting right, staying right. Okay, so I'm gonna see you on the next one. Stay up. I'm gonna see y'all soon. Until that next one, peace.